Hello and happy Sunday afternoon to everybody who's tuning in to us. If you are new in these parts, my name is Clarissa Constantine and I'm the founder of ParenTween Connection, and we are where parents go when they don't know where to go. Why do I say that? Because we bring in all kinds of professionals to have conversations about all kinds of topics relevant to life with those alien beings known as teenagers. So today we have JP Marsh with us, and we are going to be talking about life post-divorce, co-parenting, navigating life with new partners when your ex gets ready to couple up again, and all that fun kind of activity. So first of all, JP, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So let's start with a little bit of your background. Who are you? How did you land in the space that you consider yourself an expert in this particular arena?
So my daughter's 10 now, but we've been doing the co-parenting thing for a little over 8 years. We split up right after she turned 2. And everything that we have figured out. We're not, tied up in the custody court system. We didn't have to go through a divorce. We were unmarried parents, and we don't have any outside stuff that forces us to act a certain way. So everything that we figured out on our own, and we were just adults and this and that. But, early on there was the normal kind of conflict, the hurt feelings, the, instant, like I was always instantly defensive, regardless of what was being said to me or what was being asked of me early on, and those kinds of things. And then the better I got with communicating, the better I got at accepting the world and the reality and the life that I now have, and then doing things to make my daughter's life better, and make the relationship with her mother better. And everything just progressively kept getting better, and it became easier to communicate and easier to be around each other. And, now we're in a position where, my daughter's in a blended family, but we do the holidays together, and we do the barbecues in the summertime, the lake trips, sit by each other at school functions. And it's not a big deal. It's not one of those things where, but it's a lot better of a situation. You know what I mean? Nobody's missing out. We don't have the added anxiety and pressure of, oh my God, she's got to be here at this time for that part of the holiday, and this time for this part of the holiday, and I get her back at, you know what I mean? It's none of this like, oh, well, I got to have her home by 9 at Christmas morning, and then she's got to be back to my house by 2 for dinner, and then back to her mom so they can do, and it's none of that kind of stuff. And so it's all aspects of life a lot easier. And then the better we all got with all these situations, then the more empathy we had when things were going on for the other person. I was in an accident early at the end of last year, had to have surgery on my foot, wasn't able to drive, was on crutches, and wasn't able to really move around and this and that. And it wasn't all of this extra stress and anxiety and, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because now I can't, I was able to get help from her mother with more of the driving, more of the commuting, more of the back and forth, and more of, of all these things. And it wasn't that big of a deal because we weren't at each other's throats fighting about all these things all the time.
Sure. Awesome. So what you're saying is that for anybody who's in the thick of it, or maybe they're in the immediate post, if there is a divorce, or they're still kind of in the split or in the early days after split, what I'm hearing is that there is hope, even if they're in a space where they're like, oh my gosh, I just can't envision a world in which that could be true. So hopefully we'll plant that seed. And I like the points that you've made already, that the better you got, 2 things actually stand out to me. Number one, you owned that you were defensive in the process. It wasn't all about the other person's a bleepity bleep. You owned that you had a certain role that you played in it. And then I heard the better that you got at communication, which also tells me that maybe you think you weren't that great at communication in the first place, but you developed your skills.
Super bad. Like not even remotely good at communication. And that was, possibly if I was better at communication, then maybe we wouldn't have had all this conflict early on, and it could have been a more amicable split and this and that. And I mean, I'm not saying it's 100% me, 0% her, or anything like that. There's always going to be a certain percentage of both ways. I just know that typically when you go through a divorce or a breakup, and then you are essentially linked to that person for the rest of your life because you have children together, and that's, there's the reality of the space that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
There is none of this, oh, I just have to tough it out till they graduate. It'll get, I won't have to deal with them when my kids are adults, because you still have all these other life-changing events that one person's going to miss out on and this and that. But the biggest hurdle and the hardest step is getting out of your own feelings and accepting where you are, and stop being the person that was at the end of the relationship. So if you're fighting all the time and you're bad at communicating and you're doing all these things against each other and poking each other and pushing buttons and know how to trigger each other and do all these things, if you're still doing that, you're just living in insanity, because you're expecting a different result, except now you're not married. So they don't have to put up with it. They can just hang up on you. You know what I mean? Like, and for somebody who, I got in the bad habit, outside of the not being a very good communicator, I got in the routine of reacting instead of responding, which happens a lot when you start getting in these high conflict situations, to where I had to start carrying around one of those little 3x5 notebooks. And when I'd get a text, obviously I was instantly defensive. My nervous system goes into whack, anxiety, fight or flight. I want to react and send whatever I want to send back, but I had to start stopping myself and retraining myself and write down what I was going to send, and then leave it, come back a couple hours later, next morning, read it, and then decide if that was actually what I wanted to respond with. And 99% of the time, it's not what I was reacting, and then I would push her button and she would just push my button back, and then that would go on for a few days, and then it turned into this big fight, a week later. And that was the routine that we were on. And until I started breaking that routine and cycle, it was going to continue. I mean, we'd still be doing it if I wouldn't have tried to interrupt my actions to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I know one of the points that you wanted to talk about, JP, is something that happens a lot. I've worked with teenagers for the better part of 3 decades at this point. And so I've worked with a lot of blended families, or a lot of different definitions of family than what maybe you initially, think it's going to look like. And
Right.
I've seen so much bad mouthing of one parent by the other parent to the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's like one of your hallmarks of like, don't do it. It doesn't actually hurt the other parent, but it does hurt the kids. Talk to me about your perspective on that.
Well, I mean, essentially, even kids more, teenagers, adolescents, quite a bit. Even a lot of adults essentially look at themselves or view themselves or think of themselves as 50% mom, 50% dad. I'm half this side of the family, half that side of the family. So when you're bashing the other parent around your kids, the other parent doesn't hear you, doesn't know that you're doing it, but your kid is taking every single punch that you're throwing because they think they're 50% dad or 50% mom. So everything that you're saying, your kids are taking the hit. So then, one, they don't feel good about themselves. You're beating the shit out, you're belittling your kids and making them feel horrid because they're 50% the other parent. And then how can they feel that you love them when you hate them? So what's happening to your bond connection, your parent, the parent-child relationship? And then you start to see this separation or disconnect. And then the parents start to wonder why is my kid pulling away from me? Oh, it must be the other parent. So I better badmouth that parent more. It must be the other parent making them feel this way. You know what I mean? It's one of those weird things that a lot of people probably don't think about or really think or look at, like from an outside view like that. But you're sitting there bashing your kid all the time, and then you wonder why they're pulling away from you when they feel the hatred. You know what I mean? Like they're taking that hatred because they think they're half dad or half mom.
I've never thought about it that way, but gosh, the statement that you just made of they're taking the hit every time you say it. If you wouldn't actually physically hit your kid, if you stop and think about the fact is that verbal attack on the other parent is a comparable emotional hit.
Right.
Wow, if that doesn't make you stop and think, what does?
Right. And the younger they are, the more that they're going to take it, take it to heart, and it'll start. Yeah. And then you talk about, identity crisis, and you start talking about doing these things to escape who they are, and then you wonder why the kids, when they get into their teenage years or, 20s, and they start hiding in drugs, hiding in alcohol, trying to numb themselves, self-destructing because they're not worth anything, because what you're doing is you're sparking the fire of what their internal dialogue is going to be. So if mom or dad hates half of me and is, bashing me nonstop, then you're just sort of, opening the floodgates for their internal dialogue to just take it 10 steps farther, because that little bit that you're doing it, maybe an hour a day, or, whenever you get frustrated, or a few times a week, once they get conditioned that that's who they are because you're doing it, they're going to run wild with it. And I know from experience what internal dialogue will drive you to do, and it's never healthy.
Not pretty. No, it's really not. All right. So gosh, we could stop right here. And I think that would give a lot of people something to think about and walk away and consider how they want to show up with their kids. Talk to me then. I really liked how you said, going back to our intro conversation about, you would take a 3x5 card out and you would write down and consider how you wanted to respond. And the thought that I had then was, wow, if we could all be so effective, I wonder how much divorce we might be able to mitigate, or possibly even, before the marriage happens. Sometimes if we realize we're not so good communicators beforehand, we could stem some of the challenges. What other tools have you developed yourself, and or has your co-parent developed perhaps, to increase your communication skills? Because I know without question, the easier it is between the adults, the more effective that communication is, the easier it is, and the happier a life the child ends up happening, and the better skills the child learns. So you've got the 3x5 card, pausing before you respond. What else have you developed, JP?
So one of the big hurdles that I see a lot of people go through, and it leads into the blended families and the step parents and that kind of stuff, is when they start dating somebody new, or somebody else comes into the picture. And, we had made a deal way early. And obviously you there's a fair amount of healing and stuff. You got to get to a certain point where you respect each other enough to be able to make these sorts of arrangements and know that the other person's not going to be disrespecting me. You know what I mean? But we had made a deal early on that if I started dating somebody, or if she started dating somebody, and it was getting serious enough to the point, or turning into a relationship where they were going to be around our daughter, we got to meet them first. So my daughter's never gone to her mom's house after a weekend at dad's saying dad's girlfriend lives with us, when her mom had no idea that I was even dating somebody. Nobody met my daughter through her private life until I met them first, and I could get a feel for them, and I could get, you know what I mean? And we knew that it wasn't, and that takes a fair amount of being an adult and doing these things. Obviously I have a daughter, and I don't want to, show her that parading 5-6 women through my house a year is acceptable behavior. And that's you know what I mean? It's not who I am anyway, but at the same time, it alleviates a lot of these things and a lot of these fights, because we were adults enough to be able to be like, hey, I was dating a woman for a couple of years up until a year ago. And outside of these odd little things where maybe they're going to be around each other, we're at the fair and we run into them or something like that, that's unavoidable. I mean, it just happens, but if somebody's going to be around me and it's a relationship and they're going to be around my daughter and start to have an input in her life, then my daughter's mother should 100% get to meet them or have a feel for them or know them a little bit before it even happens. And then we had a deal we had right to first refusal. And so if something was going on, or, depending on who had her this weekend, that weekend, her mother called me up and be like, a bunch of my friends got concert tickets, whatever. Are you busy? And if I'm not busy, then I say, sure, she can come hang out with me. If I'm busy, then, then you go to grandparents, then you go to aunts, uncles, or whatever, But once again, you got to be adult enough to not throw that in their face later on. You know what I mean? Which is difficult when you're still in that conflict, kind of, hurt feelings and this and that. Sure, you're going to take the child, but the next time you get upset, you're like, well, why do you even want them this weekend? You didn't want them the last time it was your weekend, or, you know, and you start getting into these things. So you got to get sort of past that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then we communicate a lot, and we've gotten really good at communicating, but my daughter comes and goes as she pleases. Like, we have a loose schedule around her stepbrothers. That way, when they have kids, they have both kids. And when they don't have any kids, they don't have any kids. But my daughter comes and goes as she pleases. And nobody makes her feel bad about wanting to go to dad's, wanting to go to mom's, or anything like that. But we communicate and are on the same page as far as what's for dinner, homework. She's grounded at there, she's grounded here. She's not on tablet, you know, if she's not allowed on her tablet because she's in trouble at mom's, she's not allowed to come to dad's and sit for 12 hours on her tablet. TV time's the same, chores are the same, responsibilities are the same, food's the same, you know what I mean? Relatively, I mean, to an extent, but it's not a deal where when my daughter's 15, 16 and starts to think that she's an adult and needs to be independent and these sorts of things, where I'm going to go live with dad because he lets me do whatever I want. And I'm going to not go to mom's ever. And I'm not going to want to live at mom's because she has structure. You know what I mean? So communicating and being on the same page is a big bonus for the parents, because nobody's going to be left out.
Well, yeah, and it also sounds like you live geographically close enough that this is viable, right? Where, like, sometimes, you know, if, especially with younger kiddos, maybe who don't drive yet, like I know you said she's 10, you know, if you guys lived an hour or more apart, or if there was a plane flight in between you, obviously there would be some different aspects here. But it also strikes me, you know, you said you didn't necessarily have any external impetus on this. You didn't have the divorce decree to navigate those kinds of things. But a lot of families do, and a lot of families do have to come up with parenting plans. And a lot of what you're saying right here is telling me is good information to have for a parenting plan.
Right.
You know, of like, hey, these are the things we agree to legally, just in case, like, not even just in case, but like, to your point of like, in that initial time frame, even if you're both able to be adults, ultimately, maybe you're not actually both able to be adults. Maybe neither of you can be adults right now, you know, all the time anyway. Right. But then being able to go like, okay, we're going to give ourselves the help of a parenting plan to give us this structure to enable us to both be adults, because the court tells us we have to be, because this is what's best for the kids. And it's not just about the kids, I'm thinking, it's not just about, well, the other parent is likely to be like this and I want to prevent it, but it's really about helping give both of the parents structure to facilitate this.
Right. Well, structure, accountability, and I mean, I understand that nobody wants to sit down and go through and get super detailed, and everybody kind of wants to rush through the parenting plan and the divorce process, get it over with, and this and that, and da-da-da-da-da. But like any other contract, any other situation, any other life-changing, life-altering deal, the more crystal clear you can be with the goals and the plan, the better off you're going to be. You know what I mean? Like, absolutely. I could say that I want to lose weight this year, and if I lose a pound, then I completed my goal, but I don't feel good about myself because I didn't get crystal clear about what body fat I wanted, you know, the body I wanted, da 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 da. So the same thing in every aspect, you know what I mean? People are crystal clear with their goals at work, and they're crystal clear with their business goals, and they're crystal clear with all these other goals, and then this is always so vague to where, you know, everything might be going good for a little bit, and then you hit like a certain milestone or a certain thing, and it blows up in your face because nobody wanted to be clear on that. And so, like, my daughter's mother and I are on the same page when it comes to being, you know, when she gets a cell phone, when she gets her driver's license, car, you know, who's, you know, what part's responsible. And, you know, I mean, we're good about just splitting everything 50-50 outside of, you know, the certain things. But those are the big things, you know, that come up that people just overlook because they're not clear on expectations, boundaries, and these sorts of things. You know, if I was to get divorced right now, my daughter was 10 years old and we had never spoken about a cell phone, and her mom gets her a cell phone when she's 11 years old, I can't really throw a fit about it because we never even discussed, you know what I mean? Correct. Like, if you want these things to be, you know, if you're in a high conflict situation, or you're in a situation where you're struggling to be able to communicate effectively or do these things, you need these things laid out to be like, this is the expectations. This is the rules. This is how it goes. This is who pays for medical. This is who pays the car insurance. This is who buys the car. This is what you feel is acceptable distance for them to drive until they turn 17, 18, 19 years old. You know what I mean? Like, you cannot be too clear. And the more vague that everybody rushes through these and leaves it, the more conflicts constantly are popping up, because none of these things are made, a deal about.
Not clarified. Yeah, they're not established. Yeah. So talk to me briefly, because we're going to wrap up this portion of our conversation here in the next few minutes. I know one point that you wanted to encourage parents to consider, again, post-split, we're far enough out that we're starting to date again. And you talked about you and your daughter's mother had an agreement that you would each meet the new partner before your daughter did. Mm-hmm. It sounds to me that, again, one of the things that you and she considered, and you were like, hey, there will come a day that there's going to be somebody else that one or the other or both of us falls in love with, and this person is going to impact our daughter. Right. And I know one of the points that you wanted to talk about was actually embracing that opportunity for your daughter, for yourself, and recognize that there's some pitfalls that come along with competing with new partners, not just not embracing, but actually competing with them. And a couple of tips on how to foster a collaborative environment. And certainly we're going to dive deeper into this in the next part of our conversation in ParenTween Village. But give us kind of the 30,000 foot perspective for now, JP.
Well, it's the same idea that you're modeling behaviors to your children. And so a lot of people see them as an obstacle or somebody or a situation to impose their will, or even, in a competitive sort of sphere, because somebody else is around your kids or this or that, da, da, da. And so, if you're competing, then you're teaching your kids that they need to compete with people that they don't really need to compete with. You know what I mean? Because if you're competing with the other parent, let's say it's a step parent, if I was competing with my daughter's stepdad, then I'm showing my daughter that she needs to compete with her stepbrother. So then who's having then you're just creating that for your children to live that all day, every day, that they need to compete. You know what I mean? Compete for love, compete against the other kid for, to impose their will or to act like, to be the favorite, to be, all these different things. But he didn't end my relationship. He had nothing to, why would I don't understand. I don't get why people get so mad at somebody else coming in when they have nothing to do with your situation. Now, I mean, if they're doing things that need to be addressed, or overstepping boundaries, or being disrespectful, or this and that, and whatever, but you can either live peacefully together, or you can try to impose your will and compete. But I usually ask people what they're hoping to achieve. What's the end goal from the competition? From not being able to be in the same room with the other people, from not being able to sit on the same side of the football field when Friday night's around, or, not be able to be at the same school functions, or can't be at the same birthday parties, like what's your goal? To be the one left out? Because ultimately whoever's the problem is going to be the one that's left out.
Sure.
At the graduations, at the birth of your grandkids, at the, wedding of your child, and these and those and all these things. Because if you're being the problem, because you can't get along with everybody else, ultimately you're going to miss every milestone and be left out.
That's a really good point. All right. And so I know we're going to dive even deeper into that here shortly with ParenTween Village, but I ask all of our guests, JP, at the end of our conversations, and for anybody who's tuning in, if you've never been with us before, a lot of what we do, actually pretty much everything that we do at ParenTween Connection, is based on what I call the foundations of connection, where the first letter or the letters of connection spell out these foundations. So I'm going to read them to you, JP, and I'd love to know which of these kind of pops up most for you relative to this conversation, or like if you had one word that you would encourage others to embrace, something like that. So here's what they are. They start again with C, is create a safe place, observe, non-judgment, nod and smile, as in zip it, explore, challenge your truths or curiosity, take your time, innovate, own your own story, or nurture?
Zip it, take your time, and own your own story.
Tell me most about the zip it, the nod and smile.
The more that you can be aware of what's your business and what's not your business is going to be the most beneficial part of it. I find that sometimes the biggest conflict starters are not the gripe that I get from the majority of women I work with is that the dad is incapable or can't do it or whatever, whatever they want to paint it as. When it really comes down to it is they're not doing it the way that they would do it. They're not doing it wrong and they're not doing anything bad. And it's not even, negative what they're doing, but they're not doing it the exact way the mom would want them to do it or do it. And so then instead of zipping it, it's constant poking and, button pushing, because obviously you were together a long time. You know how to trigger the other person, push their buttons and this and that. And so, but that is usually carried over from when the birth of the child happened. It's the same mentality or viewpoint that they had. You weren't changing the diapers right. You weren't bathing the baby right. You weren't cuddling them right. Here, let me do it. You don't do it right. The bottle's not warm enough. Bottle's not too cold, and it's the constant attacking, even knowing the 1 degree temperature in the bottle is not going to make a difference. And
got it.
Yeah, sure, this may not be the way that you would do their bath start to finish, but they're still clean at the end of the bath. And so then it just keeps, that stone will keep rolling downhill. And then it becomes, you get the negative emotions and the divorce and all of these things. And then you get the judicial system that gives final decision to the mother, usually with the majority and the custodial rights and all these things. And that gives them the sense of power that they can demand everything done a certain way. And it's just constantly causes conflict because they're not doing anything wrong and they don't have to sit and be criticized nonstop anymore because we are not married. And you know what I mean? And so it's just this weird vicious cycle that just keeps running around in a circle.
Absolutely. I love it. All right, JP, if folks want to work with you, they want to learn more about the support that you can offer them. I know you say largely moms, but I imagine you work with some dads as well who find themselves in challenging situations. How do people find you for more support?
Instagram at JPMRSH.
MRSH, not MARSH.
Yeah, missing the A.
Okay. Awesome. Fantastic. JP, thank you. And stick around. We are going to head over here to ParenTween Village shortly. If you are not yet a member of ParenTween Village, check out our website at ParenTweenConnection.com/ParenTween Village. It's our family community that is focused on moral support, connecting parents to each other, like-minded parents who want to learn together and grow together. And we have exclusive conversations with our guests like JP. You are more than welcome to pop over there and join us. And if you haven't, make sure to follow us. If you're catching us on LinkedIn, follow the ParenTween Connection on LinkedIn. If you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe so that you get notified anytime we go live. JP, thanks so much. Stick around.
Thanks for having me.